Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of CUTS International and our partners of this project, Unnan Samanay from Bangladesh, Bhutan Media and Communications Institute, and Nepal Economic Forum, I extend my warm welcome to all of you to this webinar, where we are going to discuss infrastructure and development needs for multimodal connectivity in the BBIN sub-region, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. Now, this is a part of a series of webinars which we have been doing, and this is the third and final one, under a project which is looking at creating an enabling political economic discourse for multimodal connectivity in the BBIN sub-region. This project is supported by the Department for International Development of the United Kingdom, and also Asian Development Bank is a knowledge partner of this project. So this series of webinars is what we call, or you have invented, so I say, project inception webinars. The idea earlier was to do a project inception meeting. In pandemic, couldn't do it, so we have done this series of webinars. And we hope as well as individuals and organizations. Now, in my welcome remarks, I would like to underline 3 points very, very briefly, which have emerged from the previous 2 webinars, and also it is there in the public domain, public discourse for quite some time. My first point is, over the last few years, particularly since 2014, I would underline, we have seen that there is now a realization that connectivity comes before trade. It's not just our belief, it is no longer our understanding, it is now our realization that connectivity comes before trade. And that's a very, very important point, in my opinion, to take note of. And we have seen that there is now a much better political will with respect to connectivity. It's not just connectivity per se, but also multimodal connectivity. And we are seeing this over the last several years. Now, in each of these 3 points, at the end of them, placing them before the table, I would say, and let me just iterate that now as well, that in our opinion, in our thinking, that the glass is half full, not half empty. There are positives about these points, and there are certain not so positives as well. But I won't use the word negative, because we have still a long way to go. Well, the political will is there. At the highest political level, it is there in all these countries. That has to percolate down to the lower level, not just at the grassroots political level, but also among the communities, among the private sector, among the stakeholders who are related with the connectivity in particular. So this political will brings me to my second point. That is about investment. We are seeing that the number of investment initiatives which are going on in our countries, connectivity related infrastructure development initiatives. What we need to now see, whether it is from Asian Development Bank, whether it is from World Bank, whether it is from JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, or other agencies, even individual countries on their own, we need to see how we can synergize them. What kind of synergies that you can think about? That is something which we need to emphasize on. And this brings me to my third and final point, which is that while we all know possible benefits out of this investment, infrastructure investment, connectivity. We also know some part of cost, particularly the development cost of them. But we are still not clear. We do not yet know what are the possible social cost or socio-economic cost or political cost maybe or environmental cost maybe. Now taken together, as I said, the glass is half full. Now our aim in this project is to understand the political economy aspects of connectivity, not just the technical aspects of connectivity, and contribute towards a better informed political economic discourse for that, so that people on the ground can benefit, can get real benefit. They can understand the value of cooperation among each other. I'll end by giving one small example. We have established a bridge over a river. Time for travel has come down as a result of that. As a result of that, furthermore, the cost has come down. But what about those boatmen who have perhaps lost their livelihoods? One reason why we have seen and we are also seeing now this backlash against globalization and trade is perhaps we have only talked about the benefits of globalization and trade, and we haven't talked about the losers. We not only have to talk about them, but also see what kind of alternate that we can offer to them. And that is the political economy of connectivity and trade. So with these few words, I thank you once again. And let me now request Dr. Swarnim Wagle, who is the chairman of the Institute for Integrated Development Studies and former vice chairman of the Planning Commission of Nepal, for his opening remarks and for taking over the proceedings of this webinar. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Wagle.
Okay, so thank you, Bipul. Thank you for putting together this very distinguished panel. I'm very happy to chair this and look forward to the discussions. I know we have a very crowded presence today, almost 10 speakers in total. So we'll have to be very careful with the time. So please don't mind if I rush you after the 5th minute or so. I don't have too much to say. I think Bipul has set the stage. What I find interesting, looking from Nepal at this sub-regional cooperation amongst Bangladesh, Bhutan, the northeast of India in particular, and Nepal is, I think there are a few merits that we need to acknowledge, right? The first is there's this BBIN cooperation with the northeast as the gateway really sets the stage for greater symmetry. Otherwise, India looms so large, it dominates the South Asian economy, and with that comes this asymmetric influence and all that, right? So if you just parcel out the 7 northeastern states, perhaps add Sikkim and West Bengal, it introduces a degree of symmetry. So it can be taken as an economic subunit of Northeast India as a linchpin of sorts when it comes to BBIN cooperation. The second is, when in economics we talk a lot about second best cooperation or second best options. That is when a full-fledged regional cooperation, particularly through the aegis of SAARC, is not possible. This kind of a second best approach through BBIN and possibly through BIMSTEC is also worth pursuing, right? But the third is to really undergird what the Indian government has set out quite ambitiously, not just look east, but act east. And this is the reason, is very much the gateway to Southeast Asia. And over the last decade or so, there's been massive infrastructural investments, which we in Nepal, for example, look at very positively, right? So because we can also benefit from these regional public goods. The common themes for the northeast of India, Bhutan and Nepal is that we're all landlocked. The presence of borders adds additional complications, but even for the 7 northeastern states, I think the pain of landlockedness, this distance from world markets or regional markets is very much present. I don't need to bore you with the details on how landlocked countries tend to be also lagging economies because of that distance, that cost of trading and all that. In fact, if you look at the 40 or so countries in the world with a population of more than 250,000 that are technically landlocked, only 6 can be counted as being really rich, and they're right there in the middle of the largest common market in the world, which is the European Union. So you have the Czech Republics and the Switzerlands and the Austrias. But other than that, if you don't have much oil and minerals, these lagging landlocked countries really need to be connected to make any headway in terms of economic growth. So it's another way of looking at the importance of connectivity and infrastructure-led connectivity for lagging regions, right? So it cuts costs, it spurs growth, and it fosters externalities. This is very much from the literature. But one particular finding, as a segue to the political economic dimensions, is there's a very famous paper by Tony Venables. So he makes this, and also Paul Collier separately. They make this point that globally there's this cross-country stylized fact that if neighbors grow by 1%, economic growth 1%, on average, neighboring countries grow because of spillover impacts, because of contiguous impacts, trade, investment, other engagements, economic engagements, they grow by 0.4%. But for landlocked countries, that association is 0.7%, right? So if you are a coastal economy, you serve the world. But if you are a landlocked economy, you serve your neighbors. That's a very profound insight. And then from there, you sort of, they've moved it. The data is a bit dated, but I think it will still be true if we replicate their empirical exercise. If the neighbor's transit infrastructure improves from the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile, then half of the disadvantage that is associated with landlockedness is lifted, right? So this is, I think, this academic sort of gem really propels us to force this kind of sub-regional cooperation, particularly in the field of infrastructure, of connectivity, infrastructure-led connectivity, to cut costs, to spur growth, and foster a wide range of externalities. And this is particularly important for the kind of economies that we're talking about here, the northeast of India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. So I think let me end with a few sort of the areas where in the aftermath of COVID, I think there are new paradigms of trade, new paradigms of production, new paradigms of even FDI and other cross-border transfers that we'll be seeing. And there's a greater importance now of regional and global institutions, because we've seen with the pandemic how we just don't, it's not the solidarity that we're seeking, but tangible modes through which we can cooperate with each other, because we live in this interconnected world. So the logic that applies for cooperation to the WHO and the other international norms in fighting COVID also applies to shared infrastructure investments and taking the agenda of connectivity and sub-regional cooperation ahead. So thinning our borders, new investment and financial cooperation, looking into new sources of economic growth, such as digitalization, for example, exercise of soft power through people-to-people ties. So this is academic exchange and tourism and all the other things that we should be doing much more in this part of the world. And finally, the agenda of clean energy, trading of clean energy, displacing of dirty sources of fuel, and managing our regional commons much more effectively. So from the Himalayan waters, the regional ecosystems and all that. So I think this gives us a broad sort of a framework to look at these issues. And let me close my opening remarks in that manner and now turn to two presentations. So the first presentation is by Mr. Shohei Hara of JICA. So I would like to give him the floor. And that will be followed by another brief presentation from Mr. Arun Roy. And then we will then have short remarks from all the other distinguished panelists. So thank you. Over to Mr. Hara.
Yes. May I start now? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Shohei Hara. I'm Director General of South Asia Department in the JICA headquarters. Let me just briefly mention about myself. I started my career 30 years ago, and I stayed in India from 96 to 99 as a junior representative of my organization. And since then, I have been very much involved in, with India. Like I was a director in charge of India from 2008 to 10, and now I'm, Director General of South Asia Department, looking after 8 countries in the region. So 8 includes Afghanistan and Pakistan as well. And now, so my perspective has been very much influenced by the Indian perspective, but since I assumed this position almost 2 years ago, my perspective has changed quite a lot by visiting those countries other than India in South Asia, and especially those countries like Nepal, Bhutan, as well as Bangladesh, how they see India as their neighbor and what issues they have, etc. So this is my personal story, and could you put up the my presentation? Is it on, or can you see the? I don't know. Right. Right. Yeah. So please turn to the next slide. So in this brief presentation, I wanted to just share with you what JICA has been doing in this BBIN region. So this map is focusing rather on Bangladesh, but briefly, maybe you can turn to the next slide as well. Could you go to the next slide? Right. Well, either way, you can see that these red lines or dots are the projects that are financed by JICA in this BBIN region. And well, country-wise, we started funding a Sinduri Road project in Nepal, linking Kathmandu down to the Terai Plain. And in India, we have been increasingly working together with the Indian authorities in the Northeast region by providing connectivity within the region. And in Bhutan, we have been funding a number of bridges rehabilitation projects that contributes to the connectivity within Bhutan as well as across the border to India as well. And in Bangladesh, we have been funding a number of bridges projects as well as road projects. And now we have been heavily investing into the Matabari region, which is in the southeast part of Bangladesh, with the construction of deep sea port, as well as the construction of a huge thermal power station. So though we started our involvement in this region in a country-wise manner, and I must say that our involvement has not been so much strategic. We didn't have any intention, but we were driven by each country's necessities in establishing connectivities within their own country, own boundary. But as you can see from this map, now, the linkage between, say, for example, Tripura in India and Chittagong area are now being funded by JICA. And we can be, connecting, these two countries through, the road construction funded by our own sources. And the connectivity also can be further enhanced to Bhutan as well as to Nepal. And it doesn't, this map doesn't cover our involvement in the power sector, but we have been heavily involved in the power sector in Nepal as well as in Bhutan by supporting the hydropower stations as well as master planning of Bhutan for hydropower investments. So, you know, though not intentionally planned, but as a result, we are now supporting the connectivity in this region. And as I said earlier, India has got its own, what shall I say, necessities to link the northeastern part with the, if I may say, the main part of India. That was their original intention, and Japanese government intention was to support India's government, initiative. But as we have been, investing in other parts of this region, now we are in the part of this BBIN connectivity. And now we have been starting brief studies about linkage between this, especially this Tripura region with the Bangladesh. Not only the physical investment component, as well as the cross-border, the bureaucracy, how we can streamline the transactions, as well as many kinds of red tapes across the border, so that we can, encourage further connectivity or the movements of people and goods across the border. And in addition to that, we are now starting a brief study in the power sector connectivity. Like as mentioned earlier, the government of India had changed, tweaked its power sector policy by giving enabling environment for the cross-border power transactions, like say between Nepal and Bangladesh or Bhutan and Bangladesh. So now we are seeking some opportunities of enabling investment into these countries through India as well. So and I must say that the JICA is a part of the Japanese government, and we have been focusing on the kind of official, the government to government part of the story so far. But as we do have a rather small scale, but private sector operations, we may be able to join private sector's initiatives in this region as well. This is my first part of presentation. Second part is starting from the next slide. Could you turn to the next? Yes. This is a brief introduction of our earlier study, joint study with the World Bank, ADB, and the DFID. This is the report is called as Web of Transport Corridors in South Asia. Web means a double meaning, the web as it is, the web, or the web stands for wider economic benefit. And this report does not specifically focus on cross-border issues, but it tries to put the kind of analytical framework on how we can analyze the expected wider economic benefit of corridor development, as well as we can incorporate. I think earlier it was mentioned that there are losers in these development and investment. So we need to, correctly count those losers as well. So these methodologies, as well as the stories, are incorporated into this report. And it's very much highly recommendable for those who are interested in the corridor development, as well as the connectivity issues, to go through it. Please go to the next slide. Yes, well, this is an old map. By the way, this part was looked after by DFID. It mentions, it deals with the old imperial period. In the imperial period, everything was connected. And the investment for the railways and the roads and etc. Was looked after by the imperial power. So the entire subcontinent was very much may not be well, but connected beyond the current border. Please go to the next slide. Yes, this is a list of highlighted many transport investments in as well as beyond South Asia. And there are new initiatives and old and new, and some part remains regional, some part remains continental. And you can see that there's some new initiative called as Belt and Road Initiative being promoted by China. But more traditionally, the linkage between the Asia and Europe, or South Asia and Europe, South Asia and East Asia have been there. And by having this, the Bangladesh is now becoming a center of the connectivity. So in earlier slides, you can see we have been investing quite a lot in Bangladesh, as well as the areas around Bangladesh. It may justify how we are being involved. Please go to the next slide. Yes, this is a very much conceptual framework of types of transport corridors. It may be linking between port and inlands, as well as rural to rural connectivity. And the growth center concept is like signified here. And along with this, now we are in earlier slides, you can see that we have been investing quite a lot in southeast part of Bangladesh. Now its initiative is called as Big B. It's not about Amitabh Bachchan, but Bay of Bengal Industrial Belt Initiative. That's called as Big B between Japan and Bangladesh. That is this is a kind of conceptual framework of how we are investing into this Big B area. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we need to have a very good framework of analysis. It's a little bit technical issue, but the basic message of this report is that it's very important to have analytical framework. That means, rather than just jumping onto the very much flashy words of connectivity or the geopolitical, aspects of these investments, but we need to have a very accurate analysis of the positive sides as well as negative sides, so that we can have a right decision. Well, though the final decision may be made at a political level, but before that, we need to have a very much of accurate and detailed analytical framework. That is the basic message of this report. Next slide, please. And again, this is the kind of conceptual framework of corridor investment intervention packages. So there are intermediate outcomes as well as much wider economic benefits. So we need to, for the benefit part, we need to capture all these aspects of corridor development in very much of an established analytical framework. Next slide, please. Again, this is the overall balance between beneficial and the detrimental impacts of a corridor intervention. Well, it's a regular kind of investment decision making. There are positive sides as well as negative sides, so that we need to have a kind of balanced view and balanced as well as in this context, much wider perspective in making decisions, in the current right decisions in the corridor development. Next slide, please. And well, I don't go too much in detail, but this is a case study focusing on Vietnam. Maybe almost 20 years ago, we started investing into the Vietnam for the highways and many other infrastructure projects, so that eventually the not only the infrastructure part, but also by the investing into the infrastructure, more other stakeholders, much wider stakeholders like a private sector, started their own investment, so that much wider benefit has become reality in Vietnam. Next slide. And this is much older story of Japanese experience, what we call as the Japan's Pacific Ocean Belt and trade-offs. By the way, these Shinkansen, the bullet train, as well as some of the power stations in the post-war Japan, had been supported by the World Bank. And now we are extending, cooperation to India for the bullet train project, as well as to other countries in the infrastructure. So it's a kind of a replication of our old story. But in this experience, in this chapter, it focuses on the good parts as well as bad parts, the air pollution, etc. So we had a very tough time during the this Pacific Ocean Belt development. Next slide, please. Yeah, and well, it's a kind of repetition of what I have been telling, but infrastructure investment itself does make some certain outcomes, but with the combination of not only the physical investment, but also the transport and trade facilitation efforts, as well as soft complementary policies. And in this context of connectivity, it needs to be cross-border, and it needs the coordination among the parties involved. So it's quite challenging, but if we do so, we can have a very good outcomes of connectivity. Next slide, please. This is some spotlights of the report, and there are many stories, not only in South Asia, but also in some other parts of issues that are involved in this corridor development. And as you can see, this involves even the gender issues, as well as some waterways development, and etc. So if you're interested, you can go through this report, which was published in 2018. Next, please. Yeah, some of the takeaways. I think I said earlier, in order to give a conscious good decisions on this corridor development as well as connectivity investments, we need to have conceptual and analytical framework rather than just jumping onto the geopolitical keywords as well as flashy political ideas. And secondly is fiscal space for infrastructure investment or operational and maintenance costs, and the debt servicing. That is a huge issue currently. And at the same time, we have to invest into the say health, education, etc. along the corridors. So we need a fine balance between those two. And the prioritization of plans and initiatives. Again, we need to have a rigorous framework as well as appraisal with a view to the wider economic benefit and detrimental factors as well. And quality matters quite a lot, especially in preparation, designing for the entire process of investment decisions as well as implementation and operational maintenance. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is my end of presentation. Japan hosted G20 meeting in 2000, I believe, 18 or 19. And in there, the G20, including countries like India or China, adopted principles for quality infrastructure investment. And I think it's more or less what I have said just 2-3 minutes ago about what is the good aspects of infrastructure investment. So thank you very much. And it is said that for the chairman of the international conferences, the most difficult task is to stop Indians to speak and let Japanese speak more. I might have spoken too much, but last word from me is that Japan is kind of bilateral, partner in this region, and we do not have any territorial ambitions whatsoever, and we do have very good relationship with those countries, BBIN or even beyond. I think, as I said, I am looking after 8 countries in the region, including Afghanistan and Pakistan. We do have very good relationship with all of those countries. So I do not know exactly, but I believe we do have a very good opportunity to play a certain role. And I want you to tell me what we can do. And we are very much happy to be part of this initiative. And though it sounds that this is the final one, but we'd like to have further discussions with you and with other authorities. And another remark, if I may, I couldn't join the first session, but I joined the second session, and I found this discussion very fair and very candid among the participants. And as I said at the outset, India is very dominant in this region, but it's very much balanced among the participants, and I love this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hara. I think you're having lived in India. You obviously you picked up on on your speaking things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
that was
much.
a very vivid illustration of all the economic corridors, and you drew on the Japanese experience as well. So that was very helpful to us to really build this web of connectivity in this part of the world. So without further ado, let me turn to Mr. Roy, Arun Roy, for his presentation.
Can I request Prashant to put up the first slide, please? Hello, Prashant. Yeah. Before I start my presentation, I must like to thank Mr. Bipul Chatterjee of Cuts International, Mr. Wagle, the chair for today's webinar, other speakers, and all participants. The presentation that I've prepared, I have taken a lot of help from Mr. Saad Manor Hussain of Bangladesh, who is an expert on IWT. In this presentation, though I have squeezed it to the maximum extent because of the time constraint, I will try to show how the major industrial hubs can be connected by an existing waterway, which is operational between India and Bangladesh. In the first slide, you see that I have shown a truncated section of the Indo-Bangladesh protocol route through red lines and through orange line. It has got five seaports and 5 inland ports en route. I have taken an additional section of Jagpur to Chittagong, which was not included as a part of protocol route in this proposed MMT, because that will give a long way for movement of containers and other cargo to the hinterlands of Bangladesh, as well as to Northeast India, Bhutan, and Nepal. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is a schematic drawing for the route, where I have indicated the tidal zone through a white line, while the upper half is non-tidal section, the lower half is tidal section. Why I considered the truncated section of the protocol route? That is because you see the last terminal, which is proposed for this MMT, the Bagabadi and Ashwan, is falling within the tidal reach. So The lower section enjoys tidal benefit and therefore is navigable by bigger size of vessels, which is not possible in the non-tidal section. In the section we have considered under this PowerPoint presentation, about 2,000 tons of vessel can operate on 24/7, except on some sections of Sundarban, which I have given few cross lines near Mongla, between Mongla and Haldia. You can see that. So there are some shallow sand dunes are there. Apart from that, the entire route up to Bagabadi and up to Ashuganj is navigable by 2,000 ton vessels. And they can carry container, they can carry bulk, they can carry break bulk. Those details I'll show you in the next slide. Can I see the next slide, please? Yeah, here you see, this is the third slide of mine. I have highlighted the ports and the inland terminals that can be made operational as on today. They have a draft of 3.5 meters. They can handle cargo vessels up to 2,000 tonners. They all have RCC jetties. They have rail connectivity, excepting three. I think only three locations, Mongla, Narayanganj, and Dhaka do not have rail connectivity, but they have very good highway connectivity, and all other terminals are having good railway connectivity. Bagabadi, the last one in the list, it is actually a operational oil terminal for northern Bangladesh. This oil terminal can also develop another RCC jetty and can work as a multimodal hub. The next slide, please. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, if we consider Bagabadi oil terminal, which is presently serving as a oil, multimodal hub, it can not only help the northern Bangladesh side, but also can help Bhutan and Nepal for movement of their multimodal container. Chattogram port will give a new dimension to Nepal and Bhutan cargo, as they will have, these two countries will have a very shorter access to the sea route. Similarly, when the upper stretch of the Indo-Bangladesh protocol route will be activated, I mean the river will be developed, then Bhutan can have its connectivity through Dhubri and Joigapur terminal. I will show you a slide where the depth of the draft of these terminals at present are only 2 meters during flood season. During lean season, it goes down to 1.5 meter. So presently, they will be able to take only 500 or 450 ton of barges, which will be not good enough for multimodal transport. Nepal can again utilize the Bagabadi terminal for movement of their container goods through Banglabanda and Fulbari route. Can I go to the next slide, please? This indicates roughly the size of barges which can operate in this route. At present, 1,000 to 1,500 ton self-propelled barges can operate round the year. If it is a tug-barge combination where one tug pushes two barges, it can take 2,000 ton of load in one go round the year. The optimum vessel condition for this fair condition, the upper sector, however, reduces. For self-propelled, it is 650 to 700 ton during monsoon, but during non-monsoon time, it goes down to 300 to 400 ton, which is not an economic movement. Similarly, if we take tugboat for the upper section, it can take maximum 1,000 ton to 1,500 ton during monsoon period. That is only for 4 or 5 months. For the balance period, we will have to remain happy with only 500 ton carrying capacity. This fairway, if we connect to the industrial hubs, through this study, we found that in India, between Calcutta and Haldia, there are around 100 industrial hubs located at a distance of 10 to 50 kilometers. Similarly, in Bangladesh, there are industrial hubs in Narayanganj, Dhaka, and Ashuganj, and the total number of industrial hubs in this region will be around 100, located at a distance of 10 to 50 kilometers. So these terminals like Calcutta, Haldia, Narayanganj, Dhaka, and Ashuganj can very well work good for movement of container and other traffic, initially by waterway, It can be from the seaport or can be from Chattogram port, and then balance portion can go by rail or road. The next slide, please. This is a last slide, but before that, I will tell you one thing. There may be a question that why MMT route has been considered as a truncated portion of the Indo-Bangladesh protocol route. If you see Google map, you'll find that the upper stretch of the Jamuna, as well as in Brahmaputra in India, it is having a very much braided condition. There, the river width is around 10 to 15 kilometers. There are many navigable channels, many islands coming in between, and formation of this multiple channels, development of multiple islands within the river, it imposes a restriction in vessel dimension. The length of the vessel is restricted. You cannot move more than 85 meters long vessel. The width of the vessel should not be more than 15 meters. And the draft, of course, in upper stretch, during monsoon, it is 2 meters. During lean season, it comes to 1.5 meters. So we have to wait for development of those locations. And then only we can think about inclusion of the other upper stretch for the multimodal transport. For the time being, however, we can start operation with the truncated section, as I mentioned. I think with this, I will come to an end because I was told to squeeze it as much as possible. So thank you so much once again. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we will take the questions at the end. So let's move on to brief remarks from all the other panelists. We'll start with Ms. Salima Ahmad, who is an MP, a member of parliament, and president of the Bangladesh Women Chambers of Commerce and Industries. So I give you the floor, ma'am, for 5 to 6 minutes. And the organizers, especially Bipul, has insisted that we end with 2 major points for them to really take to the next level. So it would be important to end with major points, 2 or 3 takeaways from your presentations. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kats and Unnan Shaman, to bring me here. You are all so much expert in this area. I don't know how I fit here, but I only know that connectivity is important as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, as a member of parliament. I would like to see that not only my country, but our neighboring countries, everyone develop, and that development is through private sector. And when we are talking about, when there was much more tension between India and Pakistan, we are all depending and talking about BBIN. And now, but when the trucks was not allowed by Bhutan, especially in Thimphu, because they said environmental issues, but actually is it so? Most probably it is not. What we know that it is about the Bhutanese Trucks Association who objected. Then Nepal was fine. We decided that, okay, all right, let Nepal, India, Bangladesh start, and maybe Bhutan will be ready. But now with the border tension with Nepal and with India, so that is also again will take a backward situation, and the cooperation will not be easy. So finally, okay, Bangladesh is ready, but Bangladesh might speak about, or Bangladeshi, the people or the citizen, even if the government want to do it, they will start talking about their traffic issues. They will start talking about whose trucks will be there, whose vehicles will be there, So there, again, some issues are there. And now in the COVID situation, the connectivity is really, really in crisis. Because personally, just I'm speaking our company, who is one of the largest importer of trucks and buses from India, we couldn't import now because it's difficult. to import it. And we know that at the moment, Indian goods has landed in Mongla port to take it to the northeastern region. So you can see the connectivity which we are talking, it's becoming a bit challenging and a bit cumbersome. So multimodal transport can be the first phase, but this is most feasible and acceptable to all based on how we allow the original country vehicles to move as far as economically, is feasible. So we are also seeing that, Shirajganj and others can be a hub. They can use the road connectivity. So politically, only at the moment, which I feel personally, it's a very personal opinion, I'm seeing that Bangladesh and India is possible at the moment, which we can see. So rest is not at the moment a politically regional connectivity can happen. So I think we are now in a stumbling blockade. How we can, again, maybe I think we can also talk about not even if not in this webinar, but later on, that how we can advocate and try to see whatever the lockdown, even with the connectivity has happened, we can start unlocking these things. So trial and negotiations are very, very important, and if that can be done, if we are all good negotiator with the private sector, with the government and all stakeholders, things will be better. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. That was very important. I think we talk about sovereign equality, all countries being equal, but we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Bhutan is less than 1 million people. India is 1,300 million people. So those kind of asymmetries really lend themselves to all these geopolitical pressures. And you refer to the motor vehicles agreement on why that hasn't happened. I think there's something from trade that we can use here. The practice of quantitative restrictions, perhaps, allow free flow of vehicles up to a certain quota, and then and then have a different governance mechanism. But this is something that we can take up separately. Let me now turn to Mr. Sakti Sinha, who is the director of the Atal Bihari Vajpayee Institute of Public Policy Research. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'll take 1 minute from the previous speakers. Okay, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Vipul. Thank you, Kutz. Good to be here. I'll be very quick, actually. Basically, very quickly, we were one economy. Partition, the war of 65 particularly, which Bangladesh will remember. And generally our autarkic policies broke up this unified market. But I would suggest that at this stage, let's take a realistic view, not an overly negative view. And I liked Vipul's point in the beginning, because, in the subcontinent is the least connected, blah, blah, blah. Fine, you're factually correct. But you cannot shame somebody, any of us, all 8 of us, 6 of us, whatever, into improvements. Shaming is not the way forward, I would suggest. We have to recognize political economy. The best of economics, if it's dealing from politics, will not work. At this moment of time, rightly or wrongly, trade, investment, globalization are not the most popular words. Again, I'm not passing judgment. This is just a factual position that I'm mentioning. So let us push the envelope quietly. Do it. I'm not suggesting, again, backing out. We must push the envelope. But let us not set ourselves up for failure by either making grand announcements or doing things that really get a pushback. You have just mentioned, Madam has just mentioned, and you've mentioned, Chair also, the transport agreement. Agreed SAARC secretaries level, agreed ministerial level, stopped at the summit level for the first time in SAARC's history. We created BBIN, the 4 countries who are backing the MV agreement and the electric trade agreement, one of which, as you just heard, backed out after that. Now, again, I'm not saying Bhutan is right or wrong, and you have suggested you can have quantitative restrictions and other stuff. Fact is, we must appreciate that this is a reality happening. Take that into account. Just don't say, oh, Bhutan is wrong. That will not help either Bhutan or us move forward. How do therefore we get ahead? If we want to get ahead, we realize somebody who understands economics will understand the need to move ahead. We should move ahead. Let's unpack it. Let's not look at some grand master plan of development. Let us separate projects and the processes, which an economist understands. On the projects, again, let's take a project by project approach. There are serious implementation issues. Between the time we announce a project, and this reminds me, BIMSTEC is a quarter century old. Mekong, for us, those of India we know, is 20 years old, right? BBIN will soon become 6 years old. Let us look at specific projects, sort out the implementation issues. Because once projects get implemented, people see, yes, something is happening. Processes are very, very important behind the issues. Now, I remember reading this paper by Ikriya Nisha Taneja's paper years ago on the India-Nepal trade. No tariff issues, no foreign exchange issues, right? And yet the sheer amount of informal trade was very high. Why was it high? Because formal trade has too much of friction in it. In informal trade, payments are much faster. Dispute settlement is much faster. And therefore, for the traders on 50 miles of the border each side, it makes much more sense. And banking channels are not required. So therefore, you don't have to show your income to the tax authorities. So these are things we must approach. A road is required, yes, but the road will go nowhere if we have not sorted out standards, custom processes, SPM, mutual recognition. I mean, all this, if a Bangladeshi exporter of chicken wants to sell it across the border into India, that chicken will have to go for testing to Calcutta. Obviously, that's impractical. That's completely impractical. We have to find systems of mutual recognition or simplifying things to make it happen. So therefore, the road will be built, but the road must become effective only if these things are sorted out. And as I said, I'm being very fast because I thought it's good to listen to the others. The key variable for most of us are our internal economic policies. 60 years ago, Dr. Manmohan Singh did his PhD from Cambridge. His thesis was on India's export pessimism, which was linked to trade barriers to imports. The two cannot be separated out. The situation is very different now. Our tariffs have gone down. We are a very large importer. Other than 1 year, for 75 years, we've had a trade deficit. And I'm comfortable with the trade deficit. I have no problems with that. But internally, as the Cuts has just circulated a paper a few hours ago on the study of SMEs in Maharashtra, and the cost of running regulatory costs are so high for SMEs. So internal policies, border processes, and specific projects. If we do this, I think, and don't talk big about making it the greatest integrated economies in the world, etc. Leave that aside, leave the rhetoric aside. Let us do some small practical things, move ahead. And I'll end by saying, when look at a map, and this was told to me in Dhaka by an economist from, I think, CPD, that if you look at the map of India's northeast, Bangladesh is the heart of the northeast of India. Bangladesh is at the heart of the BBIN. And therefore, you import raw materials, say pineapple from Tripura and oranges from Meghalaya, etc., process them in Dhaka or Faridganj, Narayanganj or wherever, sell it back to the northeast in Bhutan and Nepal. I mean, you can develop these things quite easily, fairly low-hanging fruit. These are the things I would recommend going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. I think your message that let's not set ourselves for failure is well taken, and let's focus on the low-hanging fruits. Let's focus on a project-by-project basis. And once one or two sort of projects are successful, that obviously generates demand from the people for more, right? So thank you very much for that. Let me now turn to Dr. Rajeev Singh of the Indian Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon. I think ICC has been part of this dialogue for last more than 10 years. Not only BBIN, but BIMSTEC and more specifically bilateral engagement of businesses on both sides, whether it was India, Bangladesh, or India, Bhutan, Nepal. And especially with Bangladesh, ICC has been very, very proactive and very closely working with various stakeholders. From Chamber's point of view, I would say the region has been wanting better connectivity, which used to exist pre-partition, and I think all this chicken neck and northeast becoming landlocked happened after that, and that in a way created challenges. BBIN definitely tries to address some of the issues which are there in terms of free movement of people, goods, tourists, etc. One of the factor, although there is World Bank, there is JICA, there is ADB who are investing and helping the region getting in better connectivity. But I think sometimes all these connectivity and all the infrastructure which is meant for the business, trade, and the people to use, the real challenge lies in terms of how much the local stakeholders, they are consulted and they are engaged. And that is where you find on the border, let's say the truckers' bodies on both sides, they have their own agenda. You have traders on both sides, and you have different kind of interest groups who try to influence. There is no doubt that the intent at the top is there, and all the countries at the highest level want to promote BBIN. That's how various agencies are building the infrastructure. Connectivity is improving, and we definitely see huge improvement because we have been tracking this region for last more than 10 years now, and we find there is huge improvement in terms of connectivity, in terms of mutual trust, and also the trade. But still the challenge lies in involving the real stakeholders in the process, having a dialogue, giving them the larger picture, and taking everybody on board. In Northeast, sometimes people wonder that even when the infrastructure will be built and all these economic corridors will be in place, how is it going to help the people, the local stakeholders, the youngsters, whether they are going to run enterprises, whether they will find better employment, or what are the capabilities. So I think one of the point is, which is again important, to build the absorptive capacity, because sometimes infrastructure may be there, but the people, the local people, they may not have the absorptive capacity to benefit from the infrastructure, from the schemes and the policies. I also, in a way, have taken a note of various, in a way, issues which have come up, which have been there in past. India being a large country and other countries. But I think what Mr. Wagle mentioned, and that is what we as ICC also believe, that it is important that the neighbors, they do well and they grow. And that is how you see in last 7-8 years, India has practically opened up its market to Bangladesh. Duty-free, quota-free access. And I think it's important that the countries and the trade bodies, the chambers, everybody takes a larger view, and it's also important for all of us and people like us to engage with them, to communicate to them. Unless they understand and they see the larger picture, I think we will have very little buy-in from them, and they will on the ground. We will keep facing all these non-tariff barriers, issues, and the issues of lack of trust. The last point I have is there are two themes which are very strong in the region: tourism and horticulture. So there is also need to maybe focus on these two themes, and definitely trade is important. And what Mr. Sinha just said, that the fruits, vegetables of Northeast can get processed, and Bangladesh having duty-free access to some of the large markets, it becomes a very good partnership. And I hope that we are able to, in a way, work on all these and maybe look at the larger picture. But I would like to end on a optimistic note and say that in last 10 years, we have seen huge development, and we see definite improvement. And in spite of the challenges which may be there because of personalities, people, many other issues, I think the region is going to grow and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Singh. I think your message of combining the cold economic incentives, so tourism, horticulture, it has to go hand in hand with local stakeholder engagement and the building of mutual trust. I think economics alone will not drive this agenda forward. So I think that's a very important message. Thank you so much. And let me now turn to Mr. Sandeep Raj Jain from UNESCAP. Unmute. Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
thank you, Chair. Distinguished panelists, participants, very good afternoon. I am pleased to join this Project Inception webinar organized by CUTS International. Now, to give structure to I had actually a brief presentation, but I will just make an oral intervention. There are two messages that I want to give today. In the first part, I just want to discuss briefly about our organization, what we are doing in regional connectivity. And the second thing which I want to highlight is the topic of this webinar, that is on key infrastructure and development needs. And here I will again point to two critical messages. Now let me straight away go to our regional transport connectivity. We have actually done in last more than 4 or 5 decades enormous work in fostering regional transport connectivity in the entire Asia Pacific region. And the pillars of this are the intergovernmental agreements on Asian highway, trans-Asian railway networks, and dry ports of international importance, which are the foundational pillar for developing an integrated intermodal and international transport network in Asia and the Pacific region. Now, having developed this networks agreements, which are basically a commitment by countries to develop their infrastructure in a coordinated manner. Increasingly now our focus has shifted to the software of the infrastructure, that is operationalizing these transport connectivity networks. Because there you face a lot of challenges like involvement of different government agencies, different institutional capacities, and implementation capacities of the countries. So here we are again, in ASCAP, basically we are doing 3 things to make it more clearer. One is forging intergovernmental agreements, norms. Second, we are doing a lot of normative work. And lastly, we do a lot of capacity building. So as a part of our second normative work, we have developed frameworks, identifying key issues, for example, in international road transport. For example, the issues related to temporary importation insurance, which formed the part of the BBIN agreement, actually we had already pinned down based on our experience of working in other parts of the region. Similarly, we have a framework for a railway development. And finally, we also developed a lot of tools to leverage information and communication technologies. And one very clear example of that was the Nepal electronic ECTS. This was actually demonstrated by us. We did a pilot run, and then finally, together with ADB, this has actually seen the light of the day. So let me now turn to the second part as to what is important for the region now in post-COVID era. I think the most important lesson to learn, and this has already been alluded to by the chair in his inaugural address, that digitalization is the key winner. I mean, we have to look at it from the long-term perspective and reset international freight transport operation to more digital mode. I mean, crisis provides an opportunity to really undo a lot of things, because in normal circumstances, we are not averse to change. And therefore, it is kind of a shock to the transport connectivity, which countries can leverage and do a lot of re-engineering of the business processes towards more digitalized international transport operations. And we have been suggesting to the BBIN region, one of the most important things they can make to smoothen the flow of transportation is by developing an electronic transit transport system with tracking technologies. The brief benefits have already been seen by the Nepal, how the containers latched with electronic seals can easily go to Nepal with very minimum. I mean, a lot has been written in newspapers about the benefits, and I will not go into that. I mean, this is a practical example of what we can do. In fact, the ASEAN region is already developing an ACTS. There is an ASEAN custom transit system, and if you have a similar system in South Asia, you can link these two regions seamlessly, and leveraging new technologies will be critical in this. So this is my first message, that digitalize. The second thing I want to bring to the knowledge is, or the message I want to give is on modal shift. If you see, if we see, we have actually assessed the entire region in terms of the mode of transport. This is the work in progress which we are keenly focusing, and we see the road has been a dominant mode, and we have to now give more emphasis on other modes of transport, including railways, and also, as was discussed earlier in this forum, about inland navigation or coastal shipping. A more active role is required for these modes of transport. Now, I heard with keen intent the intervention by Dr. Sinha also, and I fully agree that you have to go it and approach in an incremental manner the entire thing, because the issues at stake, and that is what gives you a low-hanging fruit. For example, as I mentioned about tracking technologies, you can really escalate this thing to ports, to various other ways in which the procedural aspects or the frictions which happens at the border crossings and at the ports can be minimized. And these actually can, they apparently look like simple, but they can have huge implication in terms of cost benefits to the importers, exporters, and those who deal day in and day out on this. So I think I will stop here and just say that we are in extraordinary times, and this is an unprecedented mode in which we are communicating. But the post-COVID world will definitely make the move towards sustainable development goals a real challenge for countries. But I think if we keep on pressing right buttons, we are sure that particularly supporting landlocked developing countries and least developing countries, which at ASCAP is our kind of a vision and mission, because often in the whole debate and narrative, these countries do not get that much traction, and we feel that it's as ASCAP we have a primary duty towards. I'll thank once again the organizers for inviting us and giving this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. I think ASCAP's work on sort of the intergovernmental norm setting is well appreciated, especially by the smaller countries in the region, and your two messages on digitalization and exercising greater versatility in the modes of transport I think is well noted. So let me now turn to, I think, so we've covered Bangladesh, we've covered India, and also internationally speakers. So we have Bhutan and Nepal left. I now give the floor to Mr. Wugyan Penjor, who is the chief editor of the Queensel newspaper.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me, La? I'm using
yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. I'm not an expert on road or transportation. I am a journalist, and what I would be saying would be, I'll be very candid, like Mr. Hara said in the beginning. First, this looks like a mini SARC, and again with Japan as the observer. And we've been talking about SARC not functioning as much as we desired as a body, but now we have this small organization which is trying to take ahead, especially on the issue of connectivity. So thank you once again for inviting me. I want to make some quick remarks. First of all, if we were not under lockdown, or if the borders were not sealed, I think it would have taken at least 3-4 days to organize this meeting and meet face to face. So Mr. Sandeep was talking about digitalization and also taking advantages of a crisis. So I think this is already an indication of why we are going to go ahead. But on Bhutan's part, I would say it's a cliche to now even say that we are a landlocked country, and then connectivity is a big challenge for Bhutan. But I will come to the BBIN agreement in the later part. Some of the members here were pointing out about it. But in terms of connectivity, I would zoom down to the ground reality. No, we at the central level, at the government level, at the regional corporation level, we are talking about the importance of connectivity. In fact, about SARC as a body, the similarities, the uniqueness of this region. But still, when it comes to connectivity, I think it's easier for a Bhutanese to travel from Singapore to Bhutan than, let's say, from Sri Lanka to Bhutan. So while we are talking about all these things at the ground level, I think it is a little bit different. And this I talk from the experience of what happened in the last 1 or 2 years in terms of transportation. Let me say this through an example. Like Bhutan is rich in stones and boulders, and Bangladesh, which is investing crores of rupees into infrastructure building, they need stones and boulders. But the problem is the two countries are not being able to trade that in a smooth way. So for example, hundreds of trucks leave Bhutan for Bangladesh, and then at the border, at the tri-junction at Burimari, where India and Bangladesh meets, it is a problem there. And then the seamless flow of goods are affected. And then if we are talking about the purpose of transport, what is the purpose of transport? If it's about movement of goods and people from place to place for enhanced socio-economic benefits, this is not happening. So while we have at the government level a lot of agreements, I think one important aspect of all this agreement is to look into the ground reality. So maybe this is one case between Bangladesh or Bhutan or India and Bangladesh. I'm sure this is also happening. Some of the speakers were talking about the growing informal trade between India and Nepal, or between India, Nepal, and some other countries. So these things are happening because when we do not have this good regulations, good agreements that can enhance seamless transportation of goods. So on the BBIN, I would say that our chairman in the beginning, not chairman, our first speaker was talking about the importance of political will. And I would say that Bhutan has not said that they will not join the BBIN. I think the present government has said that it is an opportunity, but I think they need to do they need to study it, and they actually, I don't know if they have commissioned the study, but they have said on record that they will need to do a detailed research before we sign the agreement. So I think there is a political will, but at the same time, I think the BBIN is not only about transport. We are talking about connectivity in lot other ways. For example, we're talking about railway connection. We're talking about energy. So, for example, Bhutan is rich in hydroelectricity, clean energy, and Bangladesh needs energy. And these talks had been there for, I think, almost a decade. How we can ensure that Bhutan can export its surplus energy to Bangladesh. And also on the railway, we are in one of the presentations, I saw a corridor right from northeast to Nepal, even Afghanistan. So Bhutan is a landlocked country, and then a railway to our doorsteps. Now, given our topography, a railway inside Bhutan would be a little difficult unless we have newer technology. But even these things are not happening. For example, Bhutan and India agreed on a railway from a place called Hashimara, very close to Bhutan, to an industrial park in Bhutan. And this was signed in, I think, 2008, when the former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan came to Bhutan. And then it was also called the Nehru Wangchuk Golden Jubilee Railway Line. So now I think 2008 and we are in 2020, and this has not happened. I think the challenges here, while in the beginning I was talking about the cooperation, the understanding at the central government level, but there are challenges at the ground level. For example, the West State government, the West Bengal government, or maybe the local government in that district. In this case would be Jalpaiguri district. So 2008 and 2020, we're still not started anything on this. And I can say that a lot of things are happening between other countries, maybe the TISTA agreement between Bangladesh and India. So while we talk about a lot of potentials and opportunities at the central government level, I think what is important is also look at the ground reality in the regions. For example, again, going back to the boulder business, it is a very good opportunity for both Bangladesh and Bhutan. But because of the problem along the way, these opportunities are not tapped. So, do I have some time?
I think you should wrap it up.
Okay. So anyway, then Mr. Hara, I think Mr. Hara, I'm sorry if I'm not, was talking about this, the web, the wider economic benefits. So I think web will happen if we look into all these ground realities. Otherwise, all these talks about connectivity will be entangled in a web of problems. So I'll end my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Penjor. I think on electricity trade, we have a great example, and this has been facilitated by some of our multilateral friends. India, Nepal trading electricity, Bhutan, India. And there's now talk of taking Nepali electricity to Bangladesh. So there's something tangible to look at at these win-win outcomes. On boulders and stones, I'm told there's some discussion here in Nepal also. We have lots of barren mountains. Let's sell all these stones and boulders to countries like Bangladesh. But we have 18 kilometers of the chicken neck separating us. And this is where I think India's role would be very important in easing this kind of a sub-regional collaboration. But on the Bhutanese boulders and stones, I'm told there's some already going up to Assam by truck, and then from there to Bangladesh by waterway. So there's already example. And if Bhutan pulls it off on a mass scale, we in Nepal can also emulate this, saying if Bhutan can do it, why not us, right? So this is good example of the win-win kind of items. Now, we have our final speaker, Ms. Apeksha Shah, who is the assistant professor at Tribhuvan University. So the floor is yours, Ms. Shah.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Dr. Wagle, and good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank Kat for inviting me on board for this initiative, and it is a great honor to be able to share my thoughts with such distinguished panelists. Now, a lot has already been said regarding the need and the benefit of a multi-modal connectivity in the sub-region today as well as in the past. So I think I'll just be echoing a lot of points. And well, it is a pity that despite geographical proximity and age-old relations, lack of connectivity makes the subcontinent one of the least integrated region of the world. However, the economic integration cannot be the only parameter to judge the importance of the relations among the countries of the region. And that is something that, of course, the countries are working on, and they have tried to work on in the past as well. The region has acknowledged the common sense of identity and purpose, and in the past have institutionalized the process to identify and shape collective action within the geographical region to accelerate economic growth. Now, of course, SARC, I think we've already spoken about that. It has not been as successful in delivering the objectives that was envisioned by member state countries. In this background, the initiative taken by the BBIN countries to increase the concentration of economic activity within the region is a positive development, and it mutually benefits the parties. A larger integrated regional economic space can support the supply structures of member economies to expand export capacity and achieve sustainable trade account balances, which I think has been a concern for most of the countries in the sub-region, given that we've again spoken, the sheer size of India can dominate this narrative also at times. But yeah, I think with such initiatives, we are opening up newer markets. And I think Chair also mentioned that, we are opening up markets that are not so big, or there's not so much of asymmetries between the regions that are being connected. However, this process will require policy coordination and cooperation at different levels, which is a very complicated process. And we have tried it in the past, and there are other regional initiatives like BIMSTEC that is also taking place parallelly. But I think it is vital that countries, while moving forward and learning from their past experiences, should aim at not incidental or opportunistic arrangements, but at creating solid and durable relations. I think a narrative in that line could really help countries and actors to sort of get on board. And for that, I think it is of utmost importance that we focus on bottom-up initiatives also. Yes, the political will at the highest level is important, and well, I think that is sort of present and that is sort of accepted, even though we are having some issues at the moment. But I think bottom-up initiatives should be prioritized. One of the advantages of this region is that the people across the borders already represent a unique network of formal and informal contacts that create an opportunity for robust relations. So besides just building the infrastructure, it is important that there are proper advocacy being done at the ground level, and that the pre-existing socio-cultural things are taken into consideration and are taken advantage of to create more holistic, let's say, arguments and a picture. And I think one very interesting thing that I picked up during our conversation today was about how maybe it might be better just to go on with single projects, even a single successful project can have or can prove a point of why we need an integrated region or the benefits that come with the integration process. So I think it is very important that countries move ahead with whatever seems more practical and doable. And maybe once that is achieved, it can have a ripple effect where other actors and other stakeholders see why and how this can benefit their national interest. Because in the end of the day, the regional integration is only going to be supported as long as the national interests of the countries and their domestic actors are going to be taken into account. So I think that should be a important aspect as we move forward. I think I would like to just conclude by saying that much. Thank you so much for having me over once again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shah. I think your emphasis on macro level policy coordination, as well as the bottom-up initiatives, especially in the border economies. I'd done a study in 2014 it's a World Bank policy paper. We looked at these districts, Ilam and Jhapa in Nepal, the easternmost districts, Darjeeling district in West Bengal, and then Panchgarh, I think, I don't know if you call it Panchgarh or Panchagarh in Bangladesh, and looked at, how prices differ on rice, on tea, on milk, and the presence of thick borders really is hurting consumers. So this also, together with the infrastructural investments, the hard infrastructure, the thinning of the borders that I spoke at the outset is also very important. So thank you very much. I think now, Vipul, we have, I think, 15 more minutes or half an hour. I think
half an hour.
Half an hour. So, okay, we're right on time. Thank you so much to all the panelists for your insights, as well as for sticking to your time, allocated time. So that leaves us some time for discussion. Now, let me see. Are there questions that are coming into the chat box?
Yes, Prashant is forwarding them to you.
Okay. Okay, let me start with the first one. What changes do you see in India vis-a-vis China's political behavior in terms of promoting regional integration? So this is a question from Uday Mehta of CUTS. Would any one of you like to take this question? It's maybe Mr. Hara can take this question. He was emphasizing the role of that Japan is playing here, and then I'll be happy to yield the floor to anybody else who would like to speak on this topic.
Very much.
Okay.
Thank you, but it's a very challenging question.
We're among friends here. It's a very candid room, so you are welcome to speak your mind.
Yeah, well, it may not be specifically about the BBIN, but in engaging with the development, and JICA is part of the Japanese government. So we need to keep our eyes on the other, players, what other players are doing. I mean, other players include the World Bank, ADB, as well as the emerging donors. Well, of course, including India in the other countries in the region, especially. And for example, in cases of Sri Lanka or in the Maldives, we are watching the situation, and not only the each of the individual projects, but also about debt issues of the some of the emerging donors, very much attracting our attention. And we do not like to, overload all these countries, with the debt, or that kind of bringing them to a debt overhang kind of situation. So, it's not a kind of a competition among the donors, but as far as our lending operations are concerned, we need to be very much careful in, what kind of space or what capacities they still have in external borrowing.
Okay, yeah.
That's my comment.
Yes, thank you. There's a recent policy paper out from Asia Society Policy Institute in New York, and Aid Data. It's a small outfit at the College of William and Mary that looks at Chinese public diplomacy in the region. And so from Nepal, I made a little contribution there, but it's a nice quantitative basis. How many elite visits, how many sister cities, how much in infrastructure financing that China has been doing, except India, in the rest of South Asia and Central Asia. So you may just Google that report called Silk Road Diplomacy, and it will be a very useful, sort of evidence-based study to rely on. There was one question from Mr. Raju Tuladhar, Nepal Economic Forum. Do you think development of infrastructure should be left to the private sector, given the issues of intergovernmental coordination and delay in project implementation? for example, the Bhairava ICP and the Nepalganj ICP. So anyone would like to take this? Mr. Rajeev Singh or Mr. Sandeep Jain from ISCAP? What role do you see for the private sector when we're dealing with sovereign states? Maybe Mr. Jain, you want to? Can you unmute him, please?
I would also like to add after that.
Okay.
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Jain.
Yeah, I think as far as infrastructure is concerned, the governments have to play a very pivotal role. Even if you see the integrated checkposts which have been developed in India, I mean, there is a complete process involved, because there are security concerns in this region, and therefore we have to be sensitive to that. To me, what private sector can do is to co-opt that certain of the non-essential services, like even banking, or, I mean, again, when you see infrastructure, primarily it should come from the government. This is what I view, and certain things, PPPs, you can go towards that. For example, now Indian Railways is trying to do this railway to run on a private basis. So that's where you should slowly get out of the places where you feel private sector is comfortable in doing those things. In India, maybe private sector is quite developed, and they can handle bigger projects. So they can definitely be co-opted. I mean, there cannot be any one sort of a prescription for it, whether it go to public or to private. And I think we have to go on.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Mr. Sinha, you wanted to add something there.
Just a few things. One, of course, Mr. Sandeep is completely right. But you also need good policy framework to allow the private sector to participate, because risk is a factor. Policy risk is a very big factor. Credit risk is another matter. So private sector will not normally come in unless the appropriate regulatory frameworks, policy frameworks are there, including taxation, etc. The second aspect is many of these projects, unfortunately, from the very narrow point of financial rate of return, will not justify any private sector interest in it. We, as a public policymakers, will look at the economic rate of return, which is a far more nebulous thing. No investor comes in. No. But where possible, private sector can take up the load, nothing like it. And if you look at the power stations in Bhutan, from being 100% public owned in the beginning, mostly grant, little bit of soft. Gradually, the grant element got reduced, the soft loan became larger, and now the private element has brought it. So you have to create the market in which the private sector can play its role. But if the policy environment is not supportive, you will not get the private sector.
Okay, thank you. There's something here on, BBIN is supposed to lead to more trade, but the current realities regarding, let's say, the technical barriers to trade, the non-tariff barriers, the mindset of our biggest trading partner, I think all these issues are also important to tackle. And the other question we have here, basically solicitation of comments from all the panelists, is what about the political economic factors related to possible, let's say, job losses associated with the introduction of innovative measures at the customs? So how much of that local backlash is important to be addressed for the larger, integration, sub-regional integration to go ahead? So these are some of the points that that I see here. So maybe at this point, I think I can ask each of the panelists to. There's also one question on the importance of trade in services. So health services, tourism facilitated by greater air connectivity, digitalization we already talked about, tertiary education, for example. So what about, these probably don't need the physical movement of goods or people, right? So this can be done something remotely as well. So these are some of the comments that I see here from the participants. So what we could do is maybe have another 1 or 2 minutes for each of the panelists who could also respond to some of these statements, but also make their concluding concluding remarks, maybe 1 minute each if you'd like to speak. And then I will give the floor to Bipul to conclude and wrap up today's event. So we can possibly, if you have any last parting thoughts, start in the reverse order. So Miss Apeksha Shah, would you like to react something on this? A minute maybe.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think, I guess the power asymmetries between the countries in the entire world itself, like, whenever there's going to be cooperation, some countries have to take bigger responsibilities. It does come down to overlapping interests, agreed. But, even if there are overlapping interests, the contribution sometimes might be very uneven. So maybe that also needs to be worked out. So it's not going to be that all the countries are going to invest the same amount. Maybe all countries do not even have the amount. So I think it does, in the end, come down to a lot of political will and the uneven distribution of responsibilities. But I think it is important that countries work together and realize that even these asymmetries exist. It is a shared responsibility of the countries involved, of the actors involved as they move forward. So the sense of shared responsibility has to be there, but yeah, the contribution might be uneven, depending on the interests and the role that they play in the larger region and in the world for that matter. So yeah, I think I would end by just saying that much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Mr. Penzor, can you unmute him, please?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll make a quick remark on the concerns about job loss, which is very valid. But from my few experience, I think the benefits of automation, for example, at the integrated checkpoints, I think having this kind of infrastructure will transcend the concerns of job loss. Because if you look at, again, if you go back to Burumari, the border between India and Bangladesh, this place is in a mess. Even if you go as a part of a delegate, it will take you 3-4 hours to get on the other side of the road. And then the bureaucracy involved and the inefficiency because of lack of digitalization, and also because of other unexpected things that deliberately delay procedures. So I think if we can have this, if we can leverage on technology, on the digitalization at trading points between any of the SAARC countries, there's nothing like it. I think it will really transcend the concept of job loss.
There's an interesting comment here on multimodal. Obviously, by definition, is different modes of connectivity. The challenges around environmental issues, fuel prices, and road congestion. So it's an observation that's been made by Anu Sareen. One of the major constraints is lack of efficient and effective information connectivity on various modes of connectivity. So she's just making an observation. Mr. Jain, would you like to add some final thoughts? Please unmute him. I think it's...
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Chair, very much. And what I would like to leave this evening is the fact that the political advocacy has its limits. You have to have 2 tracks. You have to show that you are doing something which is leading to some benefit to some stakeholders. For example, I mentioned about this ECTS along the India-Nepal, which is going to be very beneficial in terms of simplification of processes and procedures. It's a very simple thing, but I think it took us a lot of time to build it. And now you can, really scale it up in various corridors, use it also on road. We have been floating idea of a digital freight platform, and where, even the road permits can be exchanged electronically. So as I mentioned in my earlier intervention also, there is a time for a deep digitalization into a freight transport sector. And I'm not very competent to say anything on job losses, but I'm a strong believer that innovation and creativity in the economy can definitely open up other sectors, though there is a need for having a proper study on it to understand the clear implications, and provided maybe because the India and other countries, they do have that kind of a problem which can can lead to some sort of a social unrest. But I believe that more innovation, more creativity definitely leads to more job creation and more sectors where the educative workforce can be redeployed. So I'll end by saying that we need to take this crisis and convert it into an opportunity and do it in a staggered manner. There is no need to, as has been echoed in the panel, no need to have a very big dreams, but to move incrementally, that every time we meet, we are able to show some progress in some spheres. I think that could be a sensitive.
I think, that's a very important point. I think, the vulnerabilities, the job displacements, especially at a time like this, is very important. But we don't want to be stopping technological progress and innovation because there are some people who are going to lose. The state has to take care of them. Otherwise, we're going to sound like the Luddites from England who opposed the early wave of industrial revolution because the ECTS is also a very good reminder. I know Mr. Ravi Singh from Nepal, who was intimately involved in this, I think, and he used to speak very fondly and passionately about this. And a lot of the truckers used to oppose this, I think, but I think this was eventually implemented. So very good point. Mr. Rajeev Singh.
Yes. I think COVID has posed huge challenges in front of all of us, but I think I also see a big opportunity and a big change. Whichever way, all of us are using technology more and more. And I think the trade, and especially for BBIN, I think the trade also has to embrace the technology, digitization of records, documents, electronic transfers, electronic approvals, e-passes, and e-approvals. So the technology, I think, should be one of the major component. And during these times, it is also likely to get accepted easily by all the partner countries and also by the trade and industry. The second point is, I personally feel that it's not that BBIN is like SARC. BBIN definitely has more promise, and I personally feel that BBIN has also made some progress. So it may be a good idea to also capture some of the success stories, because there are certain achievements and milestones which BBIN has achieved. So I think while we work on low-hanging fruits, it may also be good to document some of the success stories which already exist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sinha, your closing thoughts. Unmute him, please. Still muted. He's muted. Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. Chair, let us look at what has happened in the electricity sector. India imports electricity 10 months a year from Bhutan, 1200 megawatt. We sell electricity to Bhutan in winter. Nepal has tremendous hydro potential. The reality is India sells 450 megawatts to Bhutan, to Nepal. Bangladesh, about 800 megawatts now, and going up further. Very quietly, these changes have come about. We are moving a lot. I think digitization at the frontiers is very important. India has done a very good job on the port sector. Binapol, Petapol is still a problem, but that's largely a local vested interest problem, which is not allowing reforms to come through easily. So trade does bring about macro level problems and, more important, micro level problems at the sectoral level. The sale of all gods now, Lakshmi Puja, Ganesh Puja, is now Chinese gods we buy. A whole industry which created manufacturing is gone now, shut down completely. Now, I'm not arguing for inefficiencies, but what happens is the losses come upfront, the benefits take longer, and it's more widespread. And therefore, at certain moments, you will have to take a pause and look for, as I said, what you can achieve and demonstrate the benefits of it. So then much greater buy-in is generated. And that's what I would recommend, that working together, pushing the envelope all the time, but not aiming for the moon.
Yes, thank you. I think electricity trade has been a recent success. There's a lot of work going on waterways. So there's a nice presentation here too. Let me now turn to Ms. Salima Ahmed for your thoughts.
Thank you,
I think
Chair.
yes.
What happened?
Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Okay.
But
So, as I was saying, in this COVID situation, we all feel, we understand how important connectivity is. This is a time that we all private sector, we are arguing about the connectivity. The researchers are doing research and putting it on the table. But now it is the time that how we can influence our government, who also sits on the table, always agrees and affirms that yes, this is important, but that missing is very much there. So we have to find out some strategy so that these things can be happen. And secondly, I would like to say that in this COVID situation also we understood that local supply chain is also very important. Some medicine, some vegetable, or some product which we used to import from USA or other western part of the world, now we need to depend within our country or within our neighboring countries. So without connectivity, without understanding, without this agreement making it happen, the country ultimately will face difficulties and the citizen will suffer and the economy also will not grow, because this connectivity will engage so many employment, which I think in this part of the region, every country is facing unemployment, especially in this COVID situation. So this is, I would like to say that we need to, I want to take one of the word from one of the panelists, which he said that yes, we have to go on step by step and catch the low hanging fruit and make it feasible and make it successful. So let us do that. That what are the 2 or 3 things which we can make it possible, and target it, set a goal and make a strategy and reach it. And with a dialogue and negotiations, I think our dream will be feasible and we can make it happen. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Mr. Roy, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Wagle. I think I'll refer to one point which people raised at the beginning of this webinar meeting. He said that whenever any infrastructure is coming up, many people tend to lose their job. It is very much true. We have seen in the entire Northeast, whenever a new bridge comes up, nothing less than about 500 to 600 boat people, they lose their job. Very recently, one bridge has come up in Dibrugarh. So about 3,000 people have become jobless. They have nothing to do. They are selling their ferries at a throwaway price. Some are being dismantled and being utilized as a firewood. One more bridge is coming up in Dhubri. Possibly it is with the funding of JICA. So looking into all this cuts, along with myself, we took up a study on this, because we could understand that once the bridge comes up, again another 3,000, 4,000 people will be without food. So we could pursue both the governments to consider also the smaller boats for cross-boundary movement, where they'll be allowed to move within the limited distance. And both the governments, very fortunate, they have accepted this. They have signed the protocol where smaller boats will be allowed to move a limited distance. They have already given a green signal to move the boats between Chilmari to Dhubri, which is a distance of 50 kilometers. They can carry vegetables, they can carry other household goods which are produced in one side and having demand in the other side. Similar thing has also been approved for Tripura, Sonamura to Kumilla, which is a distance of another 35 kilometers. So as and when this multimodal and other infrastructure will come up, we have to in advance also think how the people who will lose their job to be deployed and to be given alternative employment. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hara?
Yes, thank you very much. And I really enjoyed being part of this conversation. And to pick up some keywords like focusing on the incremental approach, low-hanging fruits and the use of technology, participation of a private sector, etc. So as I said earlier, I believe Japan has got a very unique relationship among the many of the stakeholders. And I see a kind of opportunity for us to link the people, across the country borders, especially by focusing on the, it's very much important to have a political level dialogue, but at the same time, I think it's very useful to have professional level, experts level interactions in power sector, in transport, and etc. So that the field level trust among the people will be more strengthened. So that as a kind of investment for the future, I believe we can have a certain role to play in this regard. And well, thank you very much for this opportunity, and we will incorporate what we have learned. Many of my colleagues are here in this conversation, and we will incorporate what we have learned into our new studies. As I mentioned, we are planning to have a cross-border transaction study between Bangladesh and India, and a brief study about electricity trade in the sub-region. So anyway, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Now I want, before giving the floor to Bipul, to maybe he can also take up some of the chairman's role of summarizing. I don't think the rich discussions today need summarizing. All the points have been very clear. So maybe in your closing remarks, Bipul, you can also tell us what you are going to take away from today's panel, and share with us your closing thoughts. So you have exactly 3 to 4 minutes, and we can end the event right on time. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Wagle. Excellent time management. So to begin with, let me thank you. I have 3 or 4 points to make, very, very briefly. But before that, let me thank Mr. Hara and all our panelists, Mr. Roy and all other panelists for their time, for their thoughts, which are very, very useful for not just for this project, but in our overall work on connectivity. A special thanks to Mr. Hara, not just for his presentation, but I was just listening to him, his last remarks. And let me thank him and the people of Japan for the support that we received, not for infrastructure development, but for raising our tricolor in independent India, quote unquote, in Northeast India, much before 1947. So let me thank him and the people of Japan for that. We shouldn't forget that. I think the time has come to officially recognize that. Number 1. Number 2, let me begin with my closing remarks by once again repeating one particular thing which Dr. Wagle has repeatedly said: Northeast India. Whenever he talked about BBIN, whenever the I came, he talked about Northeast India. And I think that is the central character of the story that we are talking about. I think while this particular project of ours is limited to BBIN, but going forward, not in a big way, again, incremental approach, step-by-step approach, project-by-project approach, whatever way you say this, I think we should not lose sight of Myanmar, Burma, number 1, on the south, and Tibet on the north. I underline the word Tibet. Then I would say a couple of more things, and let me thank Dr. Singh for reminding us that there are a number of success stories. Small they may be in one way of looking at them. But if I look at incremental, if I look into that word incremental, project by project, step by step, they are the building blocks, not stumbling blocks. So we need to look at that. So that may not be all of them, but at least many of them, in very simple language and also in local languages, including small videos on them, and do the wider dissemination, getting communities on board for quote-unquote cooperation. Now, when you talk about all these things, when you talk about bridges, roads, we should not lose sight. They are not just concrete. We have to also see, and that is where the presentation which has been made by Mr. Hara, both Mr. Hara and Mr. Roy, that we have to also think about, link them with products, horticulture products, for example. There is a success story, pineapple from Bhutan, or oranges from Bhutan, northeast, going to Bangladesh, getting processed, coming back. Prawn is a success story, prawn group. So private sector involvement is very, very important. So I'll end by saying, by going back to the first, in the beginning, the 3 points which I have made, I think, and I'm saying not as a bit of an emotional person, but also very, very objectively, along with some passion, I think that we have got very good inputs on those 3 points which I have made in the beginning, not just from this webinar, but also from previous webinars, as well as whatever we're getting in the public domain, in the public discourse. So with those remarks, let me close here. Let me thank everybody for your participation. We are going to send you the report. And this is, as I said, I would end by saying this is the beginning of the project. Though this is the final webinar of the project Inception, this is the beginning of the project. And we look forward to work with all of you, in order to make the glass little more than half full. And I think we can do it. We have to also remember the content of that glass, not just water. There are others also, other things there. In the content of the glass is also very, very important. I think Mr. Singh has raised his hand. Maybe half a minute to him. We are not, time management is great, Sonny.
Okay, no, he doesn't want to speak.
I was clapping, but now that you mention it, I should have mentioned that I think we are grateful that an external player like Japan is involved in the room. That helps reduce the size asymmetry. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, on that note, we end this webinar here. Thank you to Bipul and all the distinguished panelists for this very enriching discussion. And so this is not the beginning of the end. This is the end of the beginning, right, Bipul? So looking forward to seeing how this project evolves and producing tangible results. Mind you, there are a lot of competing initiatives, similar initiatives done by others. So the challenge here would be to really add value, and we've received some very good inputs on the angles and the niche to explore, I think. So thank you very much, and have a good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.